Hi everyone, Jeffrey Haig again, and we're going to look at Chapter 4 during this short video presentation. I hope to get it under 15 minutes. Before you begin this video presentation, print out the Form 1040, the Individual Income Tax Form. Print it out from either irs.gov, I'll have a link to that, or from your textbook reading. Print out the form because we're going to be looking at it as I discuss this chapter. So as you can see, we skipped chapters 2 and 3. We will look at those at the end of the course. Chapter 4 looks at my individual income tax overview, my exemptions, and what filing status a taxpayer doesn't choose, but what filing status he or she falls into. Because remember, all these things we can't choose. We can plan, but we can't really choose what filing status we have, or what income is taxable or not taxable, or if someone's a dependent. It depends on our planning. It depends on what happened during the year. And that's why tax planning is important before December 31st or before January 1st of the next year. So once again, pause this, print out the copy of the 1040 because we'll be looking at that as we talk. All right. There's 3 learning objectives in this chapter, and you'll be covering all 3 of them. The first one will be our individual income tax formula. The second one, what makes a dependent. And the third one is what the filing status is. So this will be important when you do the midterm, when you are given a set of facts, what filing status these people will file as, and if someone's a dependent or not. And that is looked at the homework too in this chapter. All right, so the first page, 4-1, they always give you that tax scenario about a family or an individual and what they're thinking about doing or what took place during the year. Page 4-2, we see Exhibit 4-1, and that's our individual tax formula. This calculation, you don't have to memorize it, you just have to understand how it works, is exactly what's on the Form 1040, which I'm sure everyone or several of you, most of you have filed that Form 1040. Maybe you filed 1040EZ or 1040A. This is the Form 1040, which we'll be looking at during the course. The individual income tax formula. If you look on Exhibit 4-1, gross income, remember gross income is different than taxable income, 2 different things. Gross income is line 22 of the Form 1040. That's basically all the income that I'm reporting there. Minus 4 adjusted gross income deductions, and that's line 36. I'm subtracting deductions for adjusted gross income from my total income. Line 37 is then my adjusted gross income at the bottom of Form 1040. Adjusted gross income on line 37 goes to line 38 on the other side of the Form 1040. If you look back to the formula here, where it says minus from AGI deductions, the greater of standard deductions, or the itemized deductions. Standard deduction we look in this chapter. Itemized deductions we look in a future chapter. That's line 40. If you look on the Form 1040, that will be line 40. The greater of either my standard deduction or my itemized deduction. Line 42 is when we take our personal and dependency exemptions, my exemptions. I minus that to reduce my adjusted gross income. Line 43, basically that's the income that I'm taxable, or that's going to be taxable. I apply the tax rate based on our schedules from last chapter. That's the income, the taxable income that gets the rate applied to it. Income tax liability, That's what basically the line 44, how much tax someone owes. Other taxes, lines 57 through 62, self-employment tax, taxes on other transactions, gets reported on lines 57 to line 62. Total tax is line 47, okay? Because line 44 may be my tax liability, but I may have some more taxes on there. Line 47 being my total tax. Credits, line 55, the total of all the credits. If I pay taxes to another country on income, if I paid more Social Security tax than I should have, that's credits that will reduce my tax. Lines 64 through 73, prepayments. If I had taxes withheld on my W-2, if I made some tax payments during the year, I'll put those amounts in there. Then line 57, line 75, which is my line of if I overpaid, I get a refund. And line 76A is where I put, if I have a refund due, it goes into there. Line 78 is the line where I show if I have a tax due. Okay? So that's basically that tax formula. Like I said before, you don't memorize that tax formula. You just understand how it works on pages 1 and 2 of the Form 1040. So as we go through this chapter, page 4-5 has an exhibit 4-3, and this tells us types of income and what their character is. And we'll get into more of that later in future chapters. If you look under this exhibit 4-3 and look under the column that says character, some income is ordinary. Ordinary income is basically like W-2 income or self-employment income. There's qualified dividend income, and there's also capital income. And we'll talk about that more later. Depending on the character of the income, that'll tell how much tax I pay or what the tax rate is on that income. As you can see in the last column on the right, it lists the chapters that we'll be looking at to talk about these different characters of income or type of income. Exhibit 4-4, some income is excluded forever. Some income is just deferred and I'll pay tax on it later. So this little exhibit tells you what types of income is excluded forever. And some income is deferred, meaning I'm going to pay taxes on it in the future. And like I said, it shows the chapters on the right column. That'll be the chapters we'll talk about how income is treated. And if you go to page 4-6, they talk about different tax rates applied to different types of income. Okay? On this page on 4-6, they talk about income that's deferred, income that's tax exempt, ordinary income, qualified dividend income, and then capital income. Page 4-7 to 4-8, two important terms on this chapter. For AGI deductions and then from AGI deductions. For AGI deductions, which means for adjusted gross income deductions, that's on the front of the page 1040. So write that somewhere on the front of that page. Everything that's from line 23 to line 35 are deductions for AGI. From AGI deductions are on page 2 of the Form 1040. From AGI deductions. And that's basically line 40 and line 42. Deductions from adjusted gross income. Okay? What we want to do when we do a tax return or plan for someone, we want to make as many deductions as I can for adjusted gross income. We want to get adjusted gross income as low as possible, ethically, of course, based on the law. From AGI deductions include my standard deduction or my itemized deduction and my exemptions. Those reduce my adjusted gross income, but I'd rather get more deductions on the front of the Form 1040 than on the back of the Form 1040. So pages 4-7 and 4-8. 4-7 at the bottom for AGI deductions, also called deductions above the line, above line 37. And then on page 4-8, from AGI deductions, also called deductions below the line. Deductions below line 38 on page 2 of the Form 1040. Now, starting on page 4-11 is when I start talking about my personal and dependency exemptions. What qualifies as a dependent? There's lots of examples in these pages. There's a flow chart at the end of the chapter to help you determine if someone is a dependent of yours. So it goes through all the requirements, what a qualifying child is, the support test on page 413, all those different things. And then on page 4-14, they talk about the tiebreaker rules, meaning if two people, let's say a divorced couple, have a child, there's tiebreaker rules that focus on who will take that dependent on their tax return. An example for this, not the tiebreaker rules, but the example of what this causes problems at times is when one individual files their tax return right away, let's say in January, and claims that dependent when they shouldn't have. And then in April, when the other person who should be entitled to claiming that dependent files their return, but the IRS says no, someone already claimed that dependent. It becomes a big issue, and I've dealt with it a few times, trying to tell the IRS who really should be taking this exemption. So if people have that going on in, the first year of filing with a dependent, trying to figure out who should get them, try to get that person to file earlier than the other person, so there's not an issue about it. Qualifying relative on page 415. If you look at the qualifying relative, you'll notice there's no cousin mentioned. Cousin is not a qualifying relative. Lots of other relatives are, but the cousin is never a qualifying relative in the relationship test. Pages 416 and 417, 418, more examples of what a dependent is, how someone becomes a dependent. Okay. Then on page 419, we look at our last learning objective, the filing status. And if you look on page 419, taxpayers, and the taxpayer we talked about in this class is the individual. The individual can file in one of 5 ways. Married filing jointly, number 1 there. Married filing separately. Qualifying widow or widower, number 3. And that someone can take that for, I believe it's like 3 years from when the spouse dies. Single, number 4 there. And then head of household, number 5. So if you read these, married filing jointly, okay, that's what married couples usually do. Married filing separately, you'll think about, well, why would someone do that? Usually when one spouse doesn't trust the other spouse or believes the other spouse is not reporting all the income properly, they'll file married filing separate. The tax rates are higher, meaning taxable income is taxed at more squeezed levels between the amount of income. But remember, when you sign that tax return with another person, you're both responsible for the income on that return and for the tax that is due. So they can go after either spouse. Head of household, usually the lowest tax rate or taxable rate that gets applied to that. But there is a flow chart at the end of the chapter that tells you how someone qualifies for head of household. So the pages 420, 421, 422, 423 talk about all the different filing statuses. Okay? So it's important to know how those work. The conclusion of the chapter, pages 424 through 426, gives a good example of how the tax return is filled out based on all the information on Exhibit 4-10. So I would look at that, see how it works out. Because as I said, the midterm, you'll be given a set of facts. You'll have to prepare a Form 1040. Page 427, there's an appendix there. Just, scan this appendix first, but you may need it for the homework or for the quiz or for the midterm. This first flow chart on 427 is to see if someone qualifies as a dependent. And then goes on to page 428, just continuing to see if someone is a dependent or not of a taxpayer. 429, qualifying person for head of household. Like I said, it's hard to become a head of household filing status, but here's the questions, yes or no, to determine if that taxpayer can file as head of household. And then 4-30 is the flow chart to see what filing status a taxpayer qualifies for. So that's basically the chapter. So once again, before you read this chapter, read the summary points, look at the discussion questions, which I'll mention in a bit, and look at these key terms. The key terms you should know from reading this chapter on page 432 are adjusted gross income, character of income, because income may be taxable, but because of its character, it could get a lower rate applied to it. Deductions above the line, deductions below the line. Dependent, for AGI deductions, from AGI deductions. Gross income, head of household, married filing jointly, and married filing separately. Also, taxable income. Remember, taxable income is different than my income. And then finally, withholdings. Withholdings is an important term to know. Discussion questions. I like number 3, number 4, 6, 7, and 8, 9, 10, 11. They're all good to look at. Hopefully someone will post answers to one or another of these if you want to, because we do have a small class, so you can answer 2 of these questions just to help you understand the topics and also talk about to someone who may have a question for you in the future. 14, 16, 19, and 20. And then 24 and 25 are good ones to look at, looking at married filing jointly or married filing separately. So I hope this little discussion of the chapter helps you. And as you know, you can pause it anytime you want to refer back to what we're talking about. So this chapter is pretty short, but these objectives are important because depending if someone's a dependent or not, it reduces your taxable income. How you file, it will also reduce what tax rates are applied to your income, and then of course how much tax you owe. So if you have any questions about this chapter, please post them. But once again, like I said, you have to have that Form 1040 to be able to understand this chapter as you read it. Thank you.